Number 1. This happened about 4 years ago, somewhere in the month of July. I was a 19-year-old boy on vacation away with his family in Charleston, South Carolina. My home is in Atlanta, and I decided to leave the beach early so I could spend a weekend free with my then-girlfriend. My parents refused to drive back, so my only alternative was a midnight ride on a Greyhound bus all the way to Atlanta. My parents dropped me off at the bus station with a printed ticket in hand. I waited for the bus for a while. I'd arrived before midnight, of course, so I got to chat with some of the people waiting. The people seemed cool, a little sketchy. Not sure if you want detail, but this one lady who had a very loose and unashamed mouth told me of her former crack addiction and prostitution. When it came time to board the bus and leave, I got on with my backpack. The bus was the typical coach bus with 2 seats on each side of the aisle with the strip lights on the ceiling and an ugly carpet pattern on the floor. I walked to the middle and took a seat at the window on the right side. When the bus started moving, the lights turned off as we began our journey. I whipped out my cell phone and started texting my girlfriend. We talked about what we were going to do that weekend, talked about each other's day and stuff like that until eventually she told me good night, and I went to playing games on my phone until it eventually died. We made a stop in Columbia, South Carolina, and the lights turned on, making me more alert, and I noticed only one passenger got on the bus. As he walked up the aisle, I noticed 2 things in the light that didn't strike me as odd until later. His eyes were glazed and bloodshot, and were scanning up the aisles, left and right. Another thing is that he had nothing with him. He looked to be someone who was in the military, well built, about late 20s or early 30s. Anyway, he walked up the aisle and looked at the seat behind me, and I looked away and forgot about him until he sat in the aisle seat behind me. The lights turned off again and we were mobile again. In the dark bus, I was leaning my head against the glass with eyes closed. It wasn't until somewhere around 15 to 20 minutes later that I opened my eyes as we were passing street lamps down a dead street, illuminating the darkness briefly every few seconds. My eyes glanced at the window behind me, and they did a double take. It looked like the man behind me was glaring at me with an extremely angry expression on his face. I glanced again a few seconds later, and I noticed that the guy was really glaring at me, and I wasn't imagining it. I felt really uneasy and unsafe, as I was somewhere unfamiliar and, most importantly, alone. I certainly wasn't a big guy. I'm only 5'7" and 160 pounds. This guy was well over 6 foot and 200 pounds. And currently, for some reason, out for me at this moment. I tried to think of reasons of why he could look so upset with me. Had I offended him in some way? I thought to myself. He was literally staring me down like he was about to shoot a beam out of his eyes and explode the back of my skull. I couldn't pay no mind because every time I glanced over, he was still glaring at me. I knew something was definitely off about this guy. This went on for who knows how long. Because my phone was dead, which meant I had no one to contact, and no one knew where I was. Suddenly the man got up, and he moved and sat directly across from me in the aisle seat. I noticed his dead, glazed eyes never left me. He stared at me for a few minutes in the darkness, and I looked straight, trying not to make eye contact with this guy, being afraid of what he'd do. "Where are you going?" the man said in a demanding voice. I gasped silently, startled by his voice and intrusiveness, but I didn't want to piss him off. "My family is waiting for me in Atlanta," I said, making sure I told him I was expected. He said nothing, but continued staring down blankly. I began to look away when he spoke again. "I'm on my way to Indiana. I have a little trouble with some warrants." At this point, I wanted nothing to do with this man. He wasn't easing my fears, but freaking me out even more. "Want to feel good?" the man asked, digging in a baggie I noticed containing several different types of pills that he began holding out to me, insisting that I take them, but I kindly refused. He glared at me like he was going to force me to take them, but then his expression changed back to an emotionless blank stare. My luck briefly improved after that terrifying moment, when the bus stopped and the lights turned back on. The bus driver called out if anyone wanted to get off and go to the bathroom, and coincidentally I was about to shit myself and I didn't want to stay on this bus with the creepy man any longer. I pushed the door to the bathroom open, and I walked past the wall urinals and got in the first out of 2 stalls in the bathroom and did my business. And I was about to finish when I heard the door open and close. I could hear footsteps making their way to the stalls, and they stopped right in front of my stall, and it became absolutely quiet. Through the cracks I could see someone, but in my heart I already knew who it was. My thoughts were interrupted by a loud bang on my stall door, causing me to let out a terrified scream, and then they banged again, louder. He kept slamming the door, not saying anything, and I scrambled all the way to the back of the toilet with my pants still down. Suddenly the banging stopped, and everything was silent. I peeked through the crack, and he was gone. As I was getting my pants done, I saw something that will haunt me for the rest of my life. I looked down at the floor of the stall next to me, and there he was, crawling under the stall, staring at me with those glazed, bloodshot eyes. I kicked that stall open and ran out of that bathroom at Olympic speed, making it back to the bus. But the man was gone, and he never came back, nor did I ever see him again. I never rode a bus again. Number 2. This happened to me several months ago during the summer. I had just graduated high school, but I didn't have my driver's license yet. I was just a teenage girl who was more focused on finishing her last year of high school than learning how to drive anyway. My parents were out of town for the week, so I was supposed to be staying home to watch The House and Pets. However, my friend and I had plans to have a sleepover and get smoothies the day my parents left, so I put on my favourite dress and gathered my purse and bus pass. I called my mum to tell her where I would be that night. She of course finishes with, "Stay safe," and with that I hung up and made my way to the bus stop nearest my house. After I boarded the bus, I sat in my seat quietly and texted my friend, excited about the plans we had made. The bus was crowded and sticky from the summer heat, but I was too eager to care. A few stops before the one I needed to get off at, a man entered the bus. The man had shaggy, messy, whitish grey hair and stubble on his chin. He was wearing blue hospital scrubs. He shuffled onto the bus, dragging one foot slightly. He then stopped and made direct eye contact with me. It felt like an eternity, locked in a dead gaze with this strange man. He finally looked away and made his way to the seat directly behind me. I just knew he was going to do that the second we locked eyes. He wasted no time putting his hands through the hole between the backrest and the metal bar that lined the head of my seat. His hands dangled behind my neck, and if I tried to lean back in my seat comfortably, I would have been on them. I felt his thick, heavy breath circle my neck and shoulders. At the very next stop, I flew out of my current seat and pretended to retrieve one of the bus route pamphlets directly behind the driver. I then sat in the seat right behind the bus driver to escape the creepy man who was still watching me. I pretended to read the pamphlet, trying not to seem as though I was trying to get away from him. But then, I knew it was coming. The man moved closer to my new location at the next stop. I could feel his wide eyes boring into me. At this point, I had had enough of this song and dance. It was not my stop to get off yet, but I couldn't take this intense stare any longer. This close proximity was agonizing to me. I pulled the yellow cord to signal I wanted to get off. It was only one stop ahead of the one I needed to get off at originally, so I didn't think it was too inconvenient. I would have only had to walk through one more intersection anyway. As the bus driver pulled to a stop, I launched out of my seat and off the bus as fast as I could. And there it was, the feeling I knew would return, the feeling he would just so happen to get off with me. And he did. I walked quickly in the direction of my destination with a prayer in my head. I had my phone in my hands the whole time, texting my friend. I dialed 911 and was ready to hit call. I suddenly heard it. The sound of shuffling and feet scraping against the asphalt. I knew it was coming from the one leg the man dragged as he walked. I turned around to see him running at me. He had his hands out towards me and was working extra hard to pick up his limp left leg to catch up to me. His breathing was even more laboured and raspy. I ran as fast as I could down the busy street. However, I was surprised nobody seemed to notice a young girl being chased by a middle-aged man in hospital dress. I ran into a nearby shop that sells skateboards and the like. As I burst into the shop out of breath and panting, the young man working at the register asked me, "Hi, how are you?" I answered very weakly, "I'm fine, I think, but I'm being chased. Can I please hide here until I call my friend to come and get me?" He looked shocked at my response. My hands were shaking very hard. He led me over to the back of the store and sat me down. I explained what happened, and he waited with me as I called my friend. Some time passed before she got to me. The man from the bus was nowhere to be found, and we went home together. We were both terrified and looking over our shoulders the rest of the way home. I still regret not calling the police. Creepy man who stalked me on the bus. Let's not meet again. Lady Hallow here. Thanks for listening. If you have a story to share, or just want to get in contact with me, the links are in the description. And until next time, sweet dreams.